Another huge failing is, of course, beset the BBC over the Martin Bashir panorama interview with Princess Diana. And everyone in the corporation says it's terrible. They suck their teeth. And guess what? Like all the previous failings, it pretty much carries on as normal. Only Martin Bashir himself has had to resign from the BBC. But we've seen this so many times over the last decade or two, isn't it? In your view, is it acceptable now for the BBC to carry on as normal?
Well, Tom, I think this is a really important moment in time for the BBC. The Dyson report itself obviously is devastating. It's damning in many quarters. And let's not forget that the BBC has a duty of care and a responsibility to take every possible step to learn the lessons of the report, the review, and to absolutely make sure that what has happened never happens again. I also hold the view, Tom, that, look, the BBC is a world-class institution. It is renowned around the world. People look up to the BBC. And at this particular moment, I think we can all categorically say that the reputation of the BBC has been compromised. It's been seriously, seriously damaged. So I don't think this is a business as usual moment. No way. And linked to that, of course, next year, there's the midterm charter review. And I'd say this. I look at this as an opportunity. It is an opportunity to strengthen the governance, the accountability, the transparency of the BBC at a time when the multimedia world is dynamic, it continues to evolve. There have to be questions also within the BBC in terms of not just conduct, but the relevance of the BBC as the digital and media world continues to change and evolve.
Your last point, that the relevance of the BBC in what effectively a corporation founded in the early 20th century, now trying to survive in the 21st century, looks very different. How would you want the BBC to be relevant going forward? How would you want it to be governed in perhaps a better way?
Well, I think on the governance front, greater accountability. I think with all organisations and institutions, Tom, and this comes back to even corporations, look at the budget of the BBC, look at the fact that it depends also on, public revenue. There has to be accountability, look at standards in terms of relevance, even right down to some of the content programming. I know that's not for, politicians to comment on, but relevance is important for a healthy media environment, plurality in the media and the press. You've got to have greater diversity in terms of, programming, cultural, not just references, but understanding actually what the public want from their public sector service broadcaster.
It would obviously therefore follow that you find some of the BBC's programming not relevant to the large majority of the British population.
I think it's got to evolve. We live in an era of, Amazon Prime and Netflix. And Times Radio, I should add as well, relatively new medium. And that's the point. The landscape is changing. It is diverse. And that's great. That is really fantastic. We have more choice. We all want more choice. We want to be able to look elsewhere. And of course, competition, diversity, relevance is important for all organisations and institutions. That equally applies to the BBC.
What's an example that you might state of BBC programming at the moment that you don't believe is particularly diverse enough, is particularly relevant enough?
Well, look, I'm not going to go through scheduling and programming, mainly because I only appear on a few BBC programmes myself.
Do you not watch it very much? It sounds like you don't.
Well, to be fair, I've already touched on the plurality of the media and other alternatives exist, right? And I think that's important to recognise. Like quite a few other people, I watch other media outlets. I don't watch TV a great deal. And plus, Tom, as we're unlocking and, starting to get back out and about and meeting people, I think that's really my focus, as well as getting on and doing my day job rather than watching TV and the BBC.
OK. Let me just ask you about Lord Hall. He has resigned from his chairmanship of the National Gallery. He is still a legislator in the House of Lords. He gets to pass legislation on what we all do in our daily lives. Should he continue in the House of Lords, or should he step down from that too?
Well, I think the role of the House of Lords is to scrutinise and to hold account. So, look, I don't want to get into specifics with Lord Hall at all. He has stood down, obviously, for reasons that, he will explain himself. But, Tom, I do just want to come back to this overriding point that the BBC has such a huge responsibility. Look at the institution itself and how it's viewed around the world. It's got an enormous responsibility to take every step possible now, learn lessons, and obviously look at strengthening itself, the institutions, governance arrangements going forward. This is terrible. It's absolutely terrible. There's no one can hide from that, and of course this is devastating. The impact upon the royal family as well. So this is a really sobering moment, and a moment, I would just add, of great significance and great importance to the BBC and the country, I think.
Now, you're the Home Secretary. It's up to the police who they pursue for criminal prosecutions, and the CPS, of course, that's not a decision for you. But you're aware of the facts of the deceit, the fraud that took place by Martin Bashir, as he's now admitted. Would it surprise you if this ended up with a criminal investigation?
I'm not going to speculate on that, Tom. I think it's for others to look at the details of this, and it would be thoroughly inappropriate for me to speculate and comment on any of that at this stage.
All right.
I just back to the Dyson report.
Yeah.
That's where the efforts have to concentrate right now. And this isn't over. I mean, clearly there's a lot to do in this whole area. So we'll have to see how things progress.
Final question on the BBC. It still raises in 2021 £3.2 billion a year from the taxpayer. That is bigger than some entire government departments' budgets. In the modern day of age, would you like to see that figure go down over time?
Well, look, I think this will be subject to the midterm charter review next year. That's not for me to give a view on right now. My colleagues in government, the Culture Secretary and his team and others will, look at what needs to happen, not just on the licence fee, but also governance and accountability. So that is a big opportunity, I think, for the midterm charter review.
Let's move on to your announcement then. Borders, immigration. You have a new immigration plan, another bit of it you're unveiling today, to make the border fully digital. Is this beginning the end for passports?
So this is an important step, I think, Tom, now for border control, border measures, but also for our immigration policy and strategies going forward as a country. So tomorrow I'm publishing a legal migration and borders strategy. And this is looking at wholesale reform of our system. So the end-to-end reform of our system, currently the immigration system, is incredibly complicated. In the last 12 months alone, I have simplified 21 immigration routes. We're in current discussions we're working with the Law Commission right now in terms of how we simplify immigration legislation. Because over decades, since 1971, just before I was born, we have just literally applied sticking plaster on top of sticking plaster, added rules, regulations to the system. And we need to simplify the system to make it clearer, easier for people to navigate the system. But also importantly, we want to take back control. So we want to control those who come through our borders. We want to be able to count people in and out of our country. We've introduced a points-based immigration, and this is very much about the type of controls and measures that we can bring in, which will also protect our country and protect our citizens, because we will now be able to bar people from entering the country that have a criminal background, who've been convicted of sentences, high harm crimes. We'll be able to do those checks on individuals before they come anywhere near our country.
I also said a digital border under your plans means that for the first time you can properly count the actual number of people coming in and out of the country very precisely for the first time. Previously, of course, we've been relying on the ONS's passenger survey, whose numbers have proved a tad unreliable. Certainly some say that anyway. What's your view over the years on whether the numbers of newcomers coming into the country have been overcounted or undercounted?
Well, I think I couldn't sit here and give you a genuinely honest assessment of that. And you have to remember, we've as a government have ended free movement. So free movement, another one of those areas. How clearly was that recognised in previous ONS figures, data figures, etc., etc. So as a nation, to be able to know who's coming into your country for what reason, being able to count people in and out, to have different styles of checks that are digitalized and upstreamed rather than waiting for people to present themselves at primary control points with border force is an enormous step going forward. And we're in the process now when it comes to digitalization. Even under COVID, we have the famous passenger locator form. We are going to be digitalizing that for this summer. So again, we live in such a digital world. It is absolutely, the onus is on us, I think now, to no longer look at third parties to give assessments on numbers. We as a government should, and we must be able to, as part of our border controls. The public voted for this, when they said take back control of your borders. We have to be in the position where we have systems in place, where we have accurate data on who comes into our country, and stop those who we do not want to enter our country as well.
Well, talking about borders, that leads us on to COVID as well. And let me just ask you this straight up. Did you or did you not argue in January with several other cabinet ministers that all returning travellers to the UK should be put into hotel quarantine, bar none, all put on this red list rather than just a few?
No, that's not
It was
correct.
reported at the time as such.
Well, reports are often a work of fiction, so I think we should be careful about what's reported. I think it's important to say, I've said this many times, I've said this publicly as well in the Commons and at various committees, that as a government, the process around checks, border checks, health measures at the border, in fact, is how we described them earlier on last year. We put in a range of measures that date back to last January, ranging from public information from the Foreign Office, then, of course, in terms of checks around the passenger locator form and developing that. It was my department that developed that. And then linking that to the managed quarantine system as the whole process has evolved. And that system is effective and has been effective, along with the passenger locator form and the 100% compliance checks that are taking place at the borders.
Well, let me just ask you about how effective it really is. The Indian variant that we're all talking about now, obviously great news and the vaccine's overnight, but ideally we really would rather it wouldn't be here. People coming in from India until April the 23rd only had to quarantine at home. By just a process of absolute fact, in that the Indian variant is now spreading around the UK, that quarantining at home has not worked.
Well, that's not accurate.
I mean, how could you possibly disprove the fact it's spread around the country, and it wouldn't have if we put people in hotels?
Well, first of all, you've got to remember that the people that were quarantining at home were British nationals. And the system that was in place for quarantining and checks at home, led by Public Health England, have been effective. They've been effective from the outset of all of this. The other issue around the variants of concerns, not just the Indian variant, we only know about the variants of concern because we are world leaders when it comes to genomic testing and sequencing. We would not, like many other countries around the world, the majority of countries, in fact, even know about these variants of concern, which means we're able to do something other countries can't do, which is take action around variants of concern and absolutely contain and make sure we've got preventative and protective measures in place, such as surge testing, such as actually increasing and intensifying the vaccination rollout programs in some parts of the country. And just on your point about checks, of course, there have been checks even before people have come and arrived in the UK, as well as checks at the border. That information is given to Public Health England. And it's because that information is with Public Health England, they're then able to do the checks at home.
I understand. Yet still the Indian variant has spread. But look, one final question on borders. Why is it going to take until June for Heathrow Airport, this huge airport hub, to arrange a dedicated terminal for arrivals from red list nations? At the moment, and will be until the beginning of June, arrivals from green, amber and red list countries are all mixing together in Terminal 2, willy-nilly. Now that surely is a crazy situation you can't be happy with.
Well, Tom, look, I'll be very, very candid and frank about this. We have been working with Heathrow Airport and all airport operators since the pandemic, in terms of measures around social distancing in terminals, and obviously every airport has their own policy. We have been pressing for this for a considerable amount of time, and it is important. And we work with Heathrow, and they have heard our concerns, and they're working with us on this. If we could do it faster, we would absolutely do it faster, no question about that.
It was for them to do it faster; they just haven't done it.
Well, my colleagues in transport will continue to work with Heathrow on all of this. We want this to be successful. We want this to work.
Mm.
I think the concerns are legitimate. We have raised those concerns directly. Border Force staff have as well. Department of Transport have. We've come a long way, and it's great that Heathrow are working with us now to do this. We want the right outcomes. We want passengers who have to travel, because of course we're not. People right now still exercising caution around travel. There are many business travellers, people coming through the airports that need to travel right now. We want to make sure that we do everything to protect them, and this is a positive and welcome measure.
Okay, I want to bring in Danny, but let me just put to you what the Director General of MI5 said to us on a slightly different subject on Friday. Gave his first interview to Times Radio here. Ken McCullum, you'll know him very well. He said that Facebook encrypting its network without allowing the security services a backdoor access is giving terrorists, and I quote, a free pass. It's offering them a free space to plot, facilitate terrorism or paedophilia or any other sort of serious criminality. What is the government doing about that? Because you cannot be happy about that.
No, the director of MI5 is absolutely right on this. And to be very, very candid about this, in fact, it was in my first 48 hours as Home Secretary when we were hosting the Five Eyes conference in the UK. This was our number one issue and still remains the most prominent issue when it comes to not just social media, but encryption, end-to-end encryption. The British government has led the way working with our international partners and our security and law enforcement partners on this issue. And this is specifically about Facebook. Absolutely. We believe, I say this often and very frequently. 2 Fridays ago, I stood in for the Prime Minister at the Christchurch Call for Action, which again was all about terrorist content online, making sure that companies are held to account because they have a moral obligation to protect.
But Home Secretary, the problem, I'm sorry to interrupt, the problem is they're not listening to you. You by your own admission, have been saying this for 2 years. What further action can you take? Will you look at fines if they don't stop cooperating?
There are steps. We are going to introduce legislation, the online harms legislation. We are absolutely, we obviously believe strongly in terms of all of this, and we're working alongside Five Eyes allies, India, Japan. We will bring in changes. We will legislate. We will absolutely fine companies, because this is a dangerous territory for Facebook to be operating in, because the threat to our citizens and to our country, whether it's on child sexual abuse and exploitation, if you speak to my colleagues in law enforcement, the amount of abhorrent abuse that takes place on encrypted devices and online is just unbelievable, and it's deeply, it's devastating. But also, this will have a big impact on public safety in the way in which the MI5 DG has outlined.
Well, Home Secretary, can I take you to a different subject? I'd like to ask you about Dominic Cummings and his comments over the last few days, including on tweets. You've worked with Dominic Cummings and you've worked with the Prime Minister, and they're both friends of yours. So we're not going to be in the same position as you. We're going to listen to the two of them, and we won't know which of them to believe. Who would you advise us to believe?
Well, first of all, Danny, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm not going to speculate around Mr. Cummings, Dominic Cummings, and what he's going to say this week and what's been reported. I would like to take you and our listeners back, and you'll all remember this time. Well, it wasn't even this time last year. January, February, March, the sort of first quarter of last year when the pandemic hit. The strategy and the policy of the government, led by our Prime Minister absolutely vigorously, was about protecting the public, protecting public health and protecting the NHS. And that has underpinned our approach throughout this pandemic. And going back to a lot of the decision making last year, we were all involved across government in discussions, meetings, presented with data and information, in quite frankly, in very shocking terms, seeing the extent of the spread around the world, the impact upon the country, what it could lead to. Our Prime Minister made strong decisions all about protecting public health, protecting the NHS and helping to save lives.
They're going to clash with each other, though. And if you haven't got advice, I suppose, between for us as to who to choose between, what about giving him some advice? Dominic Cummings has got to choose, I suppose, between loyalty to Boris Johnson and to you and to the government, and telling what he sees as the truth. What advice would you give him? How should he choose between loyalty and the truth?
Well, I actually think, I'm not even going to get involved in that, Danny, because I think it's important. I say this as a senior member of the government. The work of the Prime Minister and his leadership throughout all of this has been absolutely clear in terms of protecting the public and public health. And, there will also, the Prime Minister has set this out himself, and rightly so, that there will be an inquiry at some stage in the future. And importantly, I think there'll be lessons to be learned about how we can do more to protect our country, because pandemics will come and go. And I think it's important to reflect upon that. What are the lessons that we've learned out of all of this that will bolster our defences and our support structures across government, how ministers are supported in decision making to save lives, should a future pandemic hit. And I think really that's the space that I'm interested in and want to be focused on, because I know for a start that's exactly what the Prime Minister will be focused on.
Home Secretary, understood. You don't want to engage in Dominic Cummings. We tried. This one, final question for you. You've got to have a view on. I don't know if you watched Eurovision last night, but the UK ended up with nul point again for the second consecutive year in a row. 26 other countries didn't feel they could vote for our song at all. Why are we so unpopular in Europe now?
Well, Tom, I did not watch Eurovision last night, and I didn't listen to it because I know it's on the radio as well. Look, Eurovision is a bit of fun, really, isn't it? It's I haven't seen the viewing ratings, but I suspect they were quite high.
But they keep on picking on us.
I wouldn't look at it that way, quite frankly, at all. It's entertainment, sometimes quite loud and gregarious entertainment from some of the costumes I've seen in the past. Look, I think the participation is there. We're active participants. We always give it a good shout. And I didn't watch it, but I've got no doubt that Team UK did exactly that last night. They gave it a good shout.
And got no point. Okay. Home Secretary, we won't draw on that either.